Hi guys, you're watching the umashow.com, and as you all know, the Uma Show is all about loving yourself, believing in your dreams, and being inspiring to live a very happy and positive life. And today on the show I have something very interesting, one of my favorite topics, clean eating and healthy eating with a nutritionist. So let's hear from her what information she has for us today. Carolina, welcome on the show.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi. Nice to meet you too. And today we're talking about something that I think everyone has questions about.
Yeah.
And that's carbohydrates.
Yeah.
There's just so many myths attached to it.
Absolutely.
So let's start with a very simple question. What is complex and simple carbohydrates?
This is an area that I find people get confused with most, and that carbohydrates is actually a very big umbrella essentially, and you have simple ones which are often referred to as sugars, and this is often interchanged with what we know as table sugar, but also there are other sugars. And it's not always clear to people exactly what we mean by the term sugar.
Right, yes.
But the term simple means that they are small and easily digestible.
Okay.
Other sugar examples would be something like fructose, which you may have heard of, which often occurs in fruit. Lactose, which is actually found in milk. This is actually a sugar, essentially. It's considered a carbohydrate, but also a sugar. So it's kind of a bit misleading sometimes to some people to get their head around quite what fits where. Then essentially complex carbohydrates are essentially large bundles of the simple sugars in a bundle and then connected. They're quite intricately connected, and depending on how well they're connected and bundled makes them more complex or not. And it's this matter that is to do with digestion, how quickly it's released into the blood and the system, that is where the health benefits or not come from carbohydrates.
How much amount of sugar can we have on a daily basis, and how do we figure that out? What's good and what's bad for us?
Well, to put it in a term that people often understand, because another thing I find very commonly is that when you talk about grams and things like that, what does that really mean? But a lot of the time it correlates to around 10 to 12 teaspoons of sugar a day would be recommended as a sort of healthy intake.
10 to 12
teaspoons
as a fine on a daily basis.
Well, that's technically a maximum.
Okay.
That would be a limit where that's okay. When I was saying earlier about how sugar is interchanged, anything that's like a syrup, a honey, table sugar, all of these are considered sugars. You've also got then the fructose from fruit and things like that. These are all considered sugar, and they contribute towards your sugar intake for the day. So whereas some people might think, oh, they can have then 10 teaspoons of table sugar, that's not necessarily the case. Because if you're also having a glass of juice, should we say, especially if you juice fruit, you've taken everything, all the fibre from it, all the solid material from it, and essentially made it into a liquid sugar. Even though there's health benefits from the fruit, and there may be vitamins and minerals present, that's still a liquid sugar, essentially, that you're taking in. And that would contribute towards your sugar intake. So yeah, a small glass of orange juice could significantly...
It's contributing to your sugar intake.
Yeah.
And then there's sugar in processed food.
Yes, exactly.
And in so many other things.
Exactly, and it's hidden so much in so many products that I would say most people on a regular daily basis would go over their sugar allowance.
So that brings me to my next question. How do we see the labels when we're buying food products from the supermarket?
This is actually very difficult, and I'd actually admit that I even still struggle myself. Sometimes I find myself with products being like, okay, I don't actually really know, I don't understand the true sugar content in this. One example I often always give, for example, if you take a plain natural yogurt and it's pure yogurt, and you look in the ingredients and it's just cow's milk, you don't see sugar, syrup or anything like that in the ingredients, when you go to the nutrition label, you'll see carbohydrates, of which sugars, and it will be all sugars. And it makes people think, of which sugars? Then it might make them think, is that table sugar? But that's the lactose within the dairy. But then, if you get a yogurt and you look in the ingredients and there's sugar or any kind of honey, syrup,
or fruits,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of the time, even like compotes or things like that are often found. You'll go to the label, you'll see carbohydrates, of which sugars, it will be higher, and it will be a mixture of the lactose and the added sugar. But there's no way of actually really determining just how much sugar they've added.
Correct.
And that's something no one can ever find out, which I find very misleading. And that's something to do with manufacturers, that essentially you've got a certain amount of sugar coming from the lactose. It will say sugar in the ingredients, but they never tell you how much they add. So if that sugar level is very high, you would assume, okay, they've added a lot of sugar, but they might not. You'll never have control of that. And I mean, for example, I'll get some examples out of you later about breakfast cereals, and you can often get a very sort of healthy muesli, should we say, and they've got all the labelling that they're good for you, for heart health and things, and they are essentially. They tend to have quite a high fibre content, things like that, but it will have a lot of dry fruit in it. They often put honey in them and things like that. And although there's a considerable fibre intake, shall we say, we could argue that there may be vitamins and minerals present as well, there's still a substantial sugar intake. Because, and if you look, most of the time you're way over the sugar intake, even from something that's considered a healthy muesli. It could possibly, depending on your portion size, take you over your sugar allowance for the day in one breakfast cereal.
In just one breakfast cereal.
And then you've got cereals that are like your honey nut cornflakes, which are
we're giving those
sugar
to kids all the time.
Yeah. Some of
so
them
they're definitely
are
having more sugar than they are supposed to.
In fact, I think I calculated, I was working on a program in the UK, with it was a childhood obesity program, and a 30-gram portion of like frosted cornflakes, and 30 grams is actually quite small. This is about this size most of the time, which most people eat more, has more sugar than a jam donut.
Oh my God, more sugar than jam.
Yeah. So, all of them are marketed to children. They have Tony the Tiger, whatever it is on it, these cartoon characters and everything. And that's just in a 30-gram portion. And you could imagine that actually a lot of the time people could probably double that.
Yes.
And that is way over your sugar allowance just in one bowl of cereal there.
So how do we simplify for people to really see the label in supermarkets?
So depending on the country, they came out with label guidance. But what they did is they essentially developed guidelines, and they were called the cut-off points. And they take 100 grams of the product, and you then say anything above this value is considered high.
Okay.
So with sugar, for example, it's 17.5 grams. This is where it can get a little bit difficult.
Right.
Well, it's 22.5 grams, but actually they were considering making it 17.5 because it's still considered so high. So you take 100 grams of this portion, and if there's more than 22.5 grams of sugar, it would be considered high.
High, okay.
And it's no matter what, it doesn't matter about the portion size. You're looking at that product, any more than that, then it's considered high no matter what you eat.
No matter what,
And unfortunately here in Dubai, most of the labels have the per 100 gram. So you can go to the nutrient label, you can go down to the carbohydrates of which sugars, go across the sugar value, and anything that falls above the 22.5 is considered high. It's a product that is high in sugar, and actually it's something that you should be aware of, and it will contribute significantly towards your sugar intake. Things to look out for, again, like I say, like the muesli cereal, which is marketed as very healthy, and it could be a good breakfast option. Most of the time, nearly every time I look at the labels, they always fall into the high value. And it's not that they're just slightly above it, they're 37, 38, nearly 40 grams of sugar.
Wow.
So this is something that's really contributing. And in fact, the frosted cereal as well, I think it's about 38 to 39 grams per 100, which means it's not just falling above, it's way into the above.
That's so interesting, and so it makes it more important for all of us to really check the labels and really research on things that we're putting in our stomach.
Exactly, and the only way that we're really ever going to solve this problem, especially with the obesity and actually having a healthy diet, is essentially just learning how to read labels a lot easier. Manufacturers make it notoriously difficult. They're tiny little labels a lot of the time.
Yes.
Of which sugars, what does that mean to someone? All of this is actually very difficult. And unfortunately, I'm trying my hardest, and I do little workshops, but it's a one-by-one basis just to try and get people to understand.
I guess we're all learning, step-by-step process.
Step-by-step, yeah. But there's a lot of other things with labels, like, for example, on a bottle of their serving suggestion is actually 250 ml. So on a standard bottle is 500 millilitres, and their serving suggestion is actually half the bottle. It's 250 ml. And I really question, does anyone really ever drink half the bottle, put it down, drink it the next day? I don't think so.
Never.
So it's things like that as well on labels that are very misleading.
Misleading.
Yeah.
True.
And that's another reason why we don't use the serving suggestion. We always go by the per 100 grams because the servings are completely made up. They are unrealistic. A lot of the time, if I look on things like, there's like a cheesecake which you can buy from the supermarket, it's packaged, and it's something like 1/35th, which is about this sort of slither of the cake. And I'm like, no one has that. When it's a cheesecake like this or something, of course you're going to have maybe an inch or so. That would be a fair amount. And so if you look at the per serving, it's completely unrealistic. So yeah, if people can try to get into the...
Just think, you know, just be more aware of what you're eating. And last but not the least, what are the myths attached to carbohydrates? Because there are a lot of good things that people stop eating at times.
Absolutely, there is a lot of myths with carbohydrates. Probably, I would say, out of the protein world, the fat world, and carbohydrate, there's most myths surrounding carbohydrates. And in my eyes, it's not necessarily. It's far more to do with the form that you eat and how much. So
how much is so important?
How much is actually one of the biggest factors. In fact, they say averagely someone's carbohydrate portion on a meal, let's say a complex carbohydrate, perhaps your bread, pasta, rice, should actually be no bigger than the size of your own clenched fist per meal. And in fact, per gram, protein and fat can carry higher calories per gram than what carbohydrate does. Unfortunately, with the carbohydrates, there tends to be a satiety with them. People like to feel full from them, so they actually eat more of them, which is the problem with carbohydrates.
So again, brings us to the same thing, quantity.
It's quantity, And I do, essentially, the form of carbohydrates, it's quite clear nowadays that refined carbohydrates, like white breads, these they're very easily digested, essentially. It goes into the blood, it spikes blood sugar, and it carries a lot of calories. And the more refined it is, the lower the nutrient value. So it's not really a feasible source of carbohydrate. The more wholemeal and brown, things like that, it can increase the value of them.
Great, thank you so much for all this information. I learned so much today.
Thank you. It's been lovely.
Well, I'm sure you all learned so much. You should write down, probably go back, repeat the video and write down all the information you gave us. I think it's so important to really know what's going in your system, what's going inside you. And a lot of times we just eat whatever comes in front of us, but stop doing that. Love yourself. It's so important to really know how to take care of yourself. And it's never too late. Start today, start now. Well, watch me on YouTube, subscribe my channel, follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Keep writing to me. Any question you have about today's video, please write to me and I'm sure you'll be able to answer those.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Thank you so much and see you guys again.